Hi, Mary.
And welcome to the Falmouth Art Center's Art Talk, Masks, Imagining and Connecting with Dr. Sandra Faiman-Silva. I'm Laura Reckford, Executive Director of the Falmouth Art Center. It is great to see so many familiar faces here and some new faces as well. I'm really excited about the talk tonight, but I want to start with some rules of the road for Zoom. For those of you new to Zoom or new to participating in art talks on Zoom. First, the mute button, the most important button. The mute button is in the bottom left on laptops, the top left on iPads. You tap on your screen to see the controls and you'll see the little microphone. And when a red diagonal line is through it, that means you are on mute. And we ask you to please stay on mute unless you have a question, and that would come at the end of the talk. We'll have a Q&A at the end. If you're not on mute, we will hear your dog bark and your phone ring and your spouse ask where dinner is. So if you're not muted and we're hearing your household sounds, don't be surprised if we mute you. But if you can wait till the end for the question and answer period, that would be great. You can also use the chat function to ask a question if you feel like you're not going to remember it at the end, and that would be fine. The video, you can watch the talk with or without your own video on. Your video lets us see your face. And if you want the video on, again, it is in the lower left or top left of your screen, and that's how we see your face as part of the meeting. The speaker view and the gallery view. You can toggle between the speaker view and the gallery view by clicking on the words in the upper right or upper left of your screen, depending on your device. When you click on the words speaker view, it will bring you to the speaker view, and that's where you'll see our speaker, Sandy, in the large screen. Gallery view is what we call the Brady Bunch view informally. It is an equal size box for every person. So this is the view you want when you want to check out who's here on the talk. But during the talk, you might want the speaker view so you have Sandy in the big box. Sandy will be showing a PowerPoint presentation during her talk. And when we share the screen for the PowerPoint, you will still see a few boxes of people at the top of your screen or on the right side. And to reduce the size of those boxes so you can see the full screen better, you click on the little horizontal line in the upper left part of where those boxes are. And that will minimize the pictures so you can see the full PowerPoint. And you can also move that little minimized box around just by dragging it with your mouse. Another announcement, we are recording tonight's meeting. There are some people who signed up but cannot attend, so we will make that recording available to them. A couple quick Art Center announcements. We are having our monthly art receptions virtually on Zoom now. The first one was this past Monday. It was a lot of fun. And during these receptions, we are having artists currently on view in the galleries show off their studios. The next one will be on Monday, October 12th at 4 o'clock. And among the artists on that Zoom virtual reception will be Jackie Reeves, who was the juror for the current show in the Herman Gallery, our autumn juried show. And she'll talk about jurying the show. And we'll have other artists who are in the exhibit show off their studio during that virtual art reception on October 12th. Some more news, we are having our first pop-up art show this weekend at the Falmouth Art Center with the work of Suzanne Packer. These beautiful oil paintings of flower bouquets are on sale for a fraction of their usual price, and it benefits the Falmouth Art Center. So we hope you'll stop by. We're open every day. We have classes both online and in person. Plus, we have 3 art exhibits going at all times. So please stop by and visit or go to our website at falmouthart.org, and you can see what's going on here. My favorite selling point about the Art Center these days is we are never crowded, so it is a safe place to be during a pandemic. My final announcement is that this talk was inspired by our upcoming exhibit in November called Masks Mandatory! We are asking our members and all others in the community who want to participate to make a mask in any medium, painting, fabric, ceramic, collage, paper mache, you name it. Submit it to the show by October 27th, and the exhibit will be a benefit for the Falmouth Art Center, as people can vote on their favorite mask for a donation and get a chance to win their favorite mask as well. And now to our program, Masks, Imagining and Connecting with Dr. Sandy Faiman-Silva. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, someone I admire greatly and am inspired by daily. Sandy Faiman-Silva, who has lived in Falmouth since 1984, is retired from serving as professor of anthropology at Bridgewater State University, where she taught for more than 30 years. She received a PhD in anthropology from Boston University, a master's in American Studies from the University of Minnesota, and a bachelor's in anthropology from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Her areas of expertise include Native North America, Latin America, political economy, gender, folklore, ethnicity, and women's studies. A community and campus activist and scholar, her first book, Choctaws at the Crossroads, The Political Economy of Class and Culture in the Oklahoma Timber Region, was an extension of her passion for social justice and her interest in Native American communities. She was awarded Bridgewater State's Distinguished Faculty Lifetime Research Award in 2009, among other awards. She has published papers in several scholarly journals and has presented papers at scholarly conferences in the United States and internationally. She enjoys her pottery classes at the Falmouth Art Center, photography, and her delightful grandchildren. Without further ado, here is Sandy Faiman-Silva.
Hello. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. It's an opportunity for us to see each other without masks and to consider masks in a different light. So I hope that you enjoy it. So I think we'll get started now. I am going to be talking about masks. So I'd like to first help us think about art as culture and where masks fit into the study of art and the cultural production of masks. Anthropologists tend to distinguish the arts according to a typology based upon how the art is produced, whether artists are educated, in what ways they're formally trained, and where these various genres fit into the typology. So we consider the arts as schooled, where people are formally trained in a particular genre of art. Folk arts tend to be defined as arts that are produced by people who are not formally trained, but who are talented and who use their talents in the production of a variety of artistic types. Folk art and folk craft are often, particularly the crafts that we call folk crafts, are utilitarian. They tend to be used, and they are artful in the way that they are produced and adorned. Indigenous arts and indigenous genres are produced by Native Indigenous people who are not formally trained in the arts. And the indigenous arts may include all the genres that we find in the folk and school traditions: storytelling, myths, performance arts, dance, drama, and so forth. But indigenous arts are linked to belief systems in the communities. They are embedded in the cosmology or the worldview of the community. And they are pervaded and permeated with symbols and meaning linked to the storytelling traditions of the people linked to their origin stories and their pantheon of gods and deities. So when we think about indigenous arts, we're talking about the realm of the sacred that is connected to the universal forces of life and death, and to the origin stories of how we came here and how we came to be. So when we investigate indigenous arts, we're looking at, again, the traditions that are involved in the whole universe of Native people, the universe that they inhabit and that they encounter and interact with, whether it's the supernatural world or the living world of animals and plants, forces of nature, the sun, the moon, and other aspects of their universe. Shall we go to the next slide? So again, as we look at indigenous arts, we may not see too many differences between the masks in these three slides. But one, I'd like you to just pay attention to how these masks use particular materials and how they present themselves. The item on the left is a contemporary trade mask, and many of them incorporate features of the indigenous arts and indigenous symbols and paraphernalia. The two other items here are used in performance, used in rituals associated with all sorts of events in the life of individuals and in the life of the community. The one on the right incorporates a lot of cowrie shells. These little shells that you see are cowrie shells. And we'll talk a little bit more about them later when we look at African art. These are African examples. And the masks often incorporate items in the making of the mask and in the presentation of the mask that has meaning beyond the surface beauty of the mask. So the masks and other paraphernalia associated with indigenous arts often have meaning well beyond just that they please the eye or they're attractive. Well, let's look at slide 3. Again, masks function in indigenous societies as part of the culture of we the people, whoever those people happen to be. They are rooted, as I mentioned, in a sense of the sacred. And the sacred means that they are invested with the power of the supernatural. Rituals where masks and other cultural objects are used allow people to connect with the sacred, with the supernatural. The performer may take on the persona of spirit beings and will garner power from that spiritual connection. Masks will be part of the paraphernalia that are used by the performer. Masks are often made by specialists who have permission to produce a mask related to a particular supernatural being, and we'll see examples of this in a few minutes. Knowledge of mask making is often a private skill. It's owned by families or lineages or clans, so that a member of that particular kin group will have permission and will have the authority to produce a mask that may represent a god or a deity, a force of nature, or other objects or other aspects of culture. Masks are instrumental. They call on the supernatural powers to assist with solving community problems, ensuring a successful harvest, ensuring a successful pregnancy or a successful hunt, or improving harmonious relationships in the community, waging war or waging peace. They will be used in rituals associated with bringing rain, finding game, or healing the sick. Shall we go to the next slide? I'm going to look at several different world regions to give you just some exposure to what masks look like in different parts of the world and what some of their meanings are. We're looking at masks from Oceania and New Guinea. Both of these masks are from different tribal groups in the Oceania, Melanesia area. And the left one is called a Mai mask, and it represents specific mythical ancestors and is typically used in male initiation rites. These are from, the Mai mask is from the late 19th to early 20th century. It's wood. Sometimes the kind of wood that is used is important. Wood may be viewed as powerful because it is a particular species that's important to that particular community. And this particular mask is used in male initiation ceremonies. The Kavat mask on the right is used in a variety of ceremonies, some of which occur during the day, others occur at night. It's associated with ceremonies related to the harvest, female fertility, agriculture, and the mourning of the dead. And these are during day rituals. Those kinds of aspects of life are dealt with through the ritual performance associated with masks and other cultural paraphernalia. Often dances are performed accompanied by an orchestra of women during the daytime Kavat ceremonies. And those rituals are associated with female fertility and agriculture. The night dance is accompanied by a male orchestra and dedicated to spirits. Spirits often travel at night, so night dances connect with spirits that abound in the night. It also is connected with animals and commodities associated with the forest where people derive their livelihood. Now these two masks, if you want to think about, well, what do they evoke? The Mai mask is a masculine image. It's a vertical cylindrical image representing maleness. The Kavat mask is in many ways a female image representing the feminine. These may be breasts, or the cleavage may be linked to the vulva or to other female parts of the female anatomy. So masks may tell us about some of the values of society, some of the overriding issues about fertility, about productivity, whether it's agricultural productivity or human productivity, ensuring that infants are healthy, that the woman is fertile, that she bears young, and that the man is powerful and strong. So why don't we look at another, this next slide is also from Melanesia. These are quite different. These are some masks from Papua New Guinea. The one on the left was produced around the year 1900, and the other one on the right is also from the early 20th century. The one on the right is made from human skulls, skulls of the deceased, and this tells us something about the meaning associated with a mask that's made with a human skull. The human skull, using the skull of a deceased person ensures that you remember that person, that that person continues to have power and potency that can affect your life, hopefully beneficial power, and that the spirit of that individual lives on in the life of the community. So the goal is to never forget your ancestor. The item on the left is also made partly from a human skull. So both of these represent the same kind of theme. These masks are used in the initiation ceremonies in the transition from boyhood to manhood. The elder who uses the mask becomes a spiritual teacher for youth that are being guided into manhood. I don't have a picture of it, but the most powerful masks in these parts of Melanesia are called Savi, S-A-V-I, and have their tongues stuck out in defiance of clan enemies and evil spirits. So again, the masks are powerful. They have the ability to assimilate the power of the supernatural and to guide humans in the use of that power to protect themselves from enemies, to ensure success in the community. In communities where there are many potential dangers, both real living dangers and dangers derived from the supernatural, from animosities or hatreds or poisonings or other dangers that may beset people. So these are both from the South Pacific region. And I hope if you have questions, you can jot them down in the chat and we'll talk about them a little later. Shall we look at the next slides? We're going to move to the northwest coast of native North America, which is another very divergent part of the world, quite far from Melanesia, but some of the themes that we have already mentioned will continue to reoccur because in the native indigenous worldview, many of the same ways of encountering the world and accounting for the world, accounting for what transpires in the world, are quite similar. The consciousness about the sacred and about the power of humans to tap into the power of the supernatural is quite a universal theme in the native indigenous world. So this slide is from the northwest coast of native North America, and I'm introducing you to the thunderbird. Some of the incarnations in masks, some of the representations involve mythical beings, supernatural beings. The thunderbird is a very common image in many parts of native North America, the Northwest and the Western United States, along with Canada and the Northwest coast of British Columbia and so forth. Supernatural beings are part of the pantheon of gods, deities, forces of nature, animals, plants, the wind, the sun, and other phenomena that are part of the world of indigenous people. Birds are important, and the thunderbird is often associated with thunder and lightning. The bringing of rain is important, and the weather is a very important feature in the life of indigenous people. And birds are the great spirits' messengers. They are the travelers between two worlds, the earthly world and the heavenly world. So birds are always important parts of the pantheon, particularly among Native American tribal peoples. The thunderbird represents power, strength. It's a mediator between heavens and the earth. The other mask, the West Coast Salish thunderbird mask that is on the lower right of your screen, is another version of a mask. This one opens. Sometimes masks they're three-dimensional and they may open or close. This one has snakes or other features associated, possibly snakes, as part of the imagery of that particular mask. Shall we move on to the next slide? Transformation masks. A theme that is common in Native Indigenous worldviews is transformation. That the supernatural beings transform, humans, we transform. When we put on or don the outfit, the costume, or the mask, we transform into the being that is represented by the mask. So the mask embodies the spirit of ancestors or of supernatural powers, supernatural beings, and the wearer will transform into that supernatural being or the spirit of that being during the performance or the wearing of the mask. Masks are not worn for routine daily activities. They are worn in the service of performance, rituals associated with connecting with the supernatural. So they have an instrumental purpose to connect you to the power of the supernatural being. The wearer embodies the transformational power evoked by the mask. And you can see the mask on the upper left opens and closes to reveal the inner image of this supernatural being. The lower mask is shown in two configurations. It's closed, and then you open it and it has a seven-sided star. No, it's actually 10-sided star. And this is called a sea monster mask. The Northwest Coast peoples rely heavily on the sea. They hunt for sea mammals as well as fish. They also hunt land mammals. But the sea is a very important part of their culture. So this mask represents an animal ancestor of one of the tribes of the Northwest Coast. And it's carved from red cedar, which is common in the northern Pacific. It would have been worn over the top of the head by a dancer in a feast performance known as a potlatch. And we're going to talk a little more about potlatch ceremonies later. But potlatches are what are called ceremonial giveaways of gifts and items to guests. So this was worn in, again, a ceremonial activity. The dancer also would have worn a shredded cloak of red cedar. So it's a rough covered cloak covering their entire body. This is called a mechanical mask. So it opens and closes. The 10 rays around the edge will be pulled open by a string to reveal the figure of the sun or possibly a starfish. So it's not clear exactly whether it's what it is, what the object is. So these are pretty complicated items. Masks belong, as I mentioned already, to a particular clan or a particular lineage. An individual must have permission in some societies to produce a particular mask belonging to his kin group. The senior elders of the community will give the person permission to produce the mask. And so in some cases, masks will simply be destroyed after use. In others, if they're particularly good masks, particularly beautiful and powerful, they may be retained and used again. Shall we go on? We're going to look at a couple more slides of the Northwest Coast. These are from the Yupik peoples, the North Wind mask, from the northwest coast of Alaska from the early 20th century. It's a wooden mask that has been painted. That's very ornate. These people subsisted again on sea mammals and fish. So some of the masks may have features of a fish on them, and we'll see one in a minute. The north wind, forces of nature, are both powerful and dangerous. So they are evoking the power of the wind to bring good fortune to their people and to ensure the hunt and to ensure that their fishing vessels, their boats, are safe when they go out to the very dangerous waters. So efforts to control nature, the weather, to control their food sources, ensure success in the hunt, were very important parts of their life and of their ritual activities associated with controlling forces of nature. On the right here, you see a photo of a shaman. A shaman is a religious specialist performing, in this case, performing a healing ritual with this child. So again, the mask is worn for those kinds of rituals and those kinds of activities as well. Shall we look at the next slide? Here's a fish mask from a similar location in the Northwest Coast, Good News Bay, Canada, the Alaskan Yupik. I don't have the pairs, but masks were often produced in pairs. And as I mentioned, in this particular society, they were discarded after use. Young men were often apprenticed to elder family members or to ritual specialists who would oversee the carving of masks. Individuals would have to gain the permission of their kin group to produce a mask. The masks were part of the pantheon of knowledge and cultural property that belonged to kin groups, clans, or lineages. They were passed on generationally from generation to generation so that the information and knowledge about mask making and the meanings associated with the masks and the pantheon of gods and deities were passed on from generation to generation. The rights to wear the particular mask was also privileged. So you could not wear a mask that did not belong to your kin group, that you didn't have permission to wear. Performances are part of the mask, the rituals associated with masks. Acting out stories, acting out myths and legends and stories, folktales, retelling clan histories were part of the activities that included masks that represented the supernatural beings, the ancestors, the gods and deities, forces of nature, and so forth, often accompanied by music, dance, and other dramatic activities. cultural knowledge was sacred and powerful. So the masks themselves were very sacred and very powerful, and they had to be protected and were treated with great respect. Okay. Shall we move to the next slide? All right. So again, I think this is one of the last slides. I do have quite a few on the Northwest coast, but it's an area that some of us are familiar with. The eagle and raven totems are represented in these masks. We talked a little bit about birds with the great spirit's messengers. The eagle was a powerful bird throughout Native North America, highly respected. The feathers were often gathered, and it was found in many tribal communities as an ancestor spirit. The Eagle clan or the Raven clan were very common throughout the tribes of Native North America. So people viewed themselves as having been descended from the eagle or the raven or other birds, animals, forces of nature, and so forth. The potlatch ceremonies that we talked about were ceremonies that were practiced in the Northwest Coast tribal communities of extreme northern United States and Western Canada. And these were, the word potlatch means to give. So these were times and ceremonies where extreme amounts of wealth in the form of objects, ceremonial blankets, for example, copper shields, breastplates, dentalium shells, different kinds of shells were collected, and other objects of value amassed in very large quantities to eventually be ceremonially given away to your guests or even ceremonially burned. During these rituals, families came together to celebrate the birth of an infant or to do a naming ceremony for a member of the community, a child, conduct marriages, mourn the loss of loved ones, or pass the rights of chiefdom from an elder to a son. So potlatch ceremonies were a very important part of the life of the tribes living on the Northwest coast of Native North America. And these tribes were quite wealthy. It was a region where there was an abundance of food. It was a very rich area in terms of environmental opportunities, a lot of wood, a lot of sea mammals, land mammals. Food could be grown there. So these people were they amassed quite a lot of wealth. And the way that they performed these rituals involved, again, very elaborate ceremonies involving very richly complex masks that represented the spirits of ancestors and the pantheon of gods and deities in their communities. In the 1880s, potlatching was banned by Christians, Christian missionaries, and government officials. They felt that these people were wantonly wasting their wealth and resources, and they prohibited the potlatch ceremonies. And eventually, many of the sacred objects, including masks, were confiscated by government officials and members of the Christian community who migrated to that region. Eventually, the regalia was sold. Some of it was sold to different museums and so forth, and it has found its way into the retail trade market, into the auction market, and so forth. In 1938, the eagle mask that you see on your screen was sold by the National Museum of the American Indian, or what is now the National Museum of the American Indian, to an English collector, and it was sent to Europe. In 2005, the mask had found its way back and was on loan to a cultural society in Alert Bay in British Columbia. So these masks, this was produced in the late 19th century. So it had quite a career of being rescued and returned to its rightful owners in Alert Bay. Masks, again, are sacred cultural property to the communities to whom these objects belong. They have a rich history and very intense meaning that is part of their religious traditions. So it has a very sad history, the history of preserving these rich cultural traditions, including the mask making traditions throughout Native North America. So why don't we go to slide 11? I thought it would be useful for us to recognize that the Aleuts, or Eskimos, people we call Eskimos, are again a different cultural community from the Northwest Coast tribes. But they also have had a very rich history of performance and mask making. They are, interestingly, we don't necessarily know much about this, but Eskimo peoples for thousands of years probably have performed rituals, and including dance and ritual performances, acting out the myths and stories of their communities. The small mask up in the upper left of this slide was found at an archaeological excavation, and it was dated to about 3,000 years old. So it's believed that the Aleuts came to the hemisphere probably 10,000 years ago. So they brought many of these cultural traditions with them as they moved, as they migrated. Their theater, their theatrical performances, and you can see the masks are rather simple and straightforward, often representing the human face, adorned with feathers and paints and other adornments. Their rituals represented visions and myths and functioned again as a device to retain and transmit the values and beliefs related to their pantheon of gods and deities and their cosmology, their explanation of the universe. It was a theater tradition that originated again in quite ancient times, and it continues to endure into the 21st century. Humans, again, it was a pantheon, it was a cosmology, a belief system that posited that humans could transform into animals and animals into humans. So it was a reciprocal relationship between humans and animals, incorporating elements of the land, of nature, animals, plants, and so forth. That was their very austere environment. Okay. Shall we look at the next slide? We're going to move to another part of the world. This particular slide introduces us to, again, another very rich world region. The map on our right shows countries where mask traditions predominate throughout sub-Saharan Africa, south to the Kalahari Desert. So this is the world region of Central Africa, Central and Southern Africa, where masking predominates. African masks, as in other parts of the world, are important parts of the cosmology, the explanations of the universe, and the performance activities of indigenous peoples. Masks represent mythical deities, mythological beasts, gods. They may be metaphors for good and evil, the dead, animals, forces of nature. So masks function as a repository for meaning in these tribal communities where we find them. Performance activities associated with specific masks appeal to the gods and deities for benevolence, appeasement, power, or bravery in battle. So they run the gamut of invocations of power, harnessing power and using power to solve the problems of their society. I talked earlier about the indigenous mask. In fact, the mask at the center of your screen is the same shot that we saw earlier in the PowerPoint. It's a Kuba face mask from the Mendi community in Central Africa. And cowrie shells feature prominently on this mask. Cowrie shells are viewed as symbols of womanhood, fertility, birth, and wealth. And if you look at the shell, and if we, I don't know, the earlier slide had a larger picture of this, but cowrie shells represent the goddess's protection, which is highly powerful and connected with the strength and power of the ocean. So the shell comes from the ocean. The cowrie shell is also associated with prosperity and the power of birth, of giving birth. And if you look at it, it looks like it's a female. It's sort of a receptacle that opens like the womb. So it's associated with the womb of the mother. Okay. And you will find images associated with different aspects of maleness and femaleness, or other aspects of potency of forces of nature or animals or plants on the masks. On the upper left, we see a group activity of masked dancers, Burkina Faso, coming into the community here. Masks in African culture, again, are associated with rituals related to manhood, womanhood, circumcision, fertility, hunting or war, purification of the village. They're used also in celebrations related to storytelling activities, the harvesting of crops, market day festivals, the hunt, resolving disputes, and burial rituals, among many others. Masks in many African societies are generally, the knowledge of mask making is generally passed on from father to son, along with the meanings associated with those masks. Again, the transformation of the wearer into a powerful spirit being is part of the belief system associated with masks. The transformation usually relies also on other activities such as music and dance, particular types of music and dance, or ritual costumes that are worn along with the mask. So the human sheds his or her mostly men, but sheds their identity and transforms into the being linked to the mask. So that is another theme that we've talked about quite a bit. The mask wearer becomes a mediator between the living and the spirit world. And it's rather like a dialogue between the humans and the pantheon of spirits. Mass dances are part of rituals associated with weddings, funerals, initiation rites, and so forth. They're pretty universal in all sorts of ritual occasions in the Central African communities where they're found. Traditional African masks have influenced European and Western arts traditions, as I mentioned in the slide. Cubism, Expressionism, Fauvism, took cues from the African mask traditions, and they're expressed in those artistic traditions, along with carnival, for example, not only in Rio, but also in New Orleans. So they have an enduring global effect in the arts of those world regions. Okay. And our last community that we're going to talk about are Native American Pueblo communities, specifically Hopi Indians, and the Kachina mask traditions. Hopi Kachinas, the masks are separate from the Kachina dolls. And the Kachinas are a very large pantheon of gods, deities, supernatural forces of nature, animals, plants, members of neighboring tribes. So there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Kachinas that are named and detailed. The Kachinas are supernatural beings that visit the Hopi community for a 6-month period each year, beginning in about January through late May. And they are called the Cloud People. They are Kachina clouds. They come from the west, from the San Francisco peaks to the west, and bring rain to a very arid community. So in the late winter and spring, when the rains come, is the time when the Kachinas visit the Pueblo communities. And that is the time of complicated and elaborate ritual performance activities where masks are worn, ritual dances are performed. And the power of the Kachinas is brought to the life of the community to help ensure the success of the Hopi people or the other tribal peoples who embrace the cosmology of Kachina spirituality. Everything that, again, that surrounds the Hopi have a supernatural associated with it. And there are just hundreds of Kachinas that represent all of the details of Hopi life. For example, there's an ashes Kachina or a gypsum weed Kachina. So they all, and these are all named, and they have specific features. There are also Kachinas that represent the neighbors of the Hopis, Navajos or Zunis, even Apaches. So each Kachina has particularly markings, symbols, and details of the costume that differentiate from others, such as plants, animals, clouds, forces of nature, the wind, rain, thunder, lightning, and so forth. Even clowns, Kachina clowns. And I did want to just talk for a minute about the difference between the Hopi masks and Kachina dolls. Hopis do have a wide range of representations of their pantheon of Kachinas, one of which is the representations through masks. The other is the representation through dolls, and I'm going to show you a couple of them right now. If we want to just go to the visual, we might want to continue with the speaker's view, but this, and we'll see if we can do this. If we can look, is there a speaker view or I'm in a gallery view now, but this particular item is a Hopi Kachina, and it is a doll, and the dolls are objects that are given to children, particularly girls, between about the ages of 1 and 10 years old, and they're meant to be instructional, to teach the children the pantheon of Kachinas. This particular Kachina is, what is it? I'm not sure what this one is actually. It's a Kachina cloud. And this one has a removable headdress. So the mask is actually removable. Now these are not sacred. The masks are sacred. The Kachina dolls are not. They are a secular object, an instructional object that parents and aunts and uncles give to their children, nieces, nephews, and so forth, to teach them about the pantheon of gods and deities in their culture. So this is the Kachina cloud. I'll show you a couple more. This is an owl Kachina, and it's kind of hard to see in the small little screen. Can we go to a full screen, or are you able to have a full screen
Sandy,
here?
so everyone individually controls their screen, and individually people can go to the speaker view and be able to see you in the big screen. So that's an individual control. And so anyone who wants to see it big will just click on speaker view on their computer. Okay, so okay, let me try that again. So I can see it. It's hard to know how whether you're able, oops, I'm not getting it. Okay, well, anyway, so this particular Kachina is an owl Kachina, and they have, again, they're adorned with particular dress. This one has feathers. It has what is probably a representation of corn. It's really just a grass here, but so again, the Kachina is an instructional tool. And one last Kachina that I have is Mudhead. This is a Kachina clown. So the clown called Mudhead has these protrusions on its head, and it's a very unusual looking Kachina. The Hopis have a very complicated and rich clowning tradition that was also the potlatch was declared illegal in the late 19th and early 20th centuries by missionaries who did not like the risque behavior associated with Kachina clowns and the risque dances and conduct in the Pueblo communities, which were really commentaries on the social life of human beings, of humanity. But they were outlawed, and some of them have been resurrected, and there is some cultural memory of these very rich traditions. But you do see them represented in the Kachinas, in the pantheon of Kachinas. So they're alive and well. So just as a final conclusion, I have one more. We'll return to number 14. If you can see this one. And this is a Hopi mask. And I did want to talk about how, again, these masks and other sacred cultural property
also was confiscated or stolen from Native tribes. The mask that you see on this slide was sold at a Paris auction, and there were a variety of auctions that eventually dispersed much of the very sacred and valuable cultural property of the Pueblo communities of the Southwest of North America, of the United States. There are pieces of legislation that were passed to protect Native indigenous cultural property: the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act and the Archaeological Resources Protection Act protect indigenous cultural property from being taken illegally, and requires that the property be returned to their rightful tribal owners, which is an ongoing process that we are continuing to pursue today. Just this year, the Massachusetts legislature is deliberating an act to protect Native American heritage. And this legislation is continuing to be under consideration in this session of the Massachusetts legislature. If you want to call your state legislator and ask them to pass this legislation this year, it would be very helpful. It protects, again, Native American tribes and Native American communities from their cultural property being sold for profit, being taken out of the stream of ownership and being sold for profit. In 2009, after 2 years of investigation, more than 40,000 objects were seized by the government as a result of these pieces of legislation. So it's an ongoing problem. And we'll go to the last slide. So I want to thank you very much. I hope we have some time for a few minutes of questions. Thank you for supporting the Falmouth Arts Center. I hope you enjoyed the talk. And let's see if we can get a couple of questions. I'm sorry.
Sandy, thank you so much. That was excellent, fascinating. And now it's time for questions. So anyone who has questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and give Sandy your question. I see Paul raising his hand.
Okay.
Sandy, I wanted to ask you if you said that there were clans that were allowed or appointed to produce the masks. Were the wearers of the mask part of the clan or another clan? And
No,
did they
they
emulate
were,
whatever that spirit person was?
yes.
Are they one person designated to be that person for, or is that clan designated to be like the shaman?
The
Shamans that go on
clan,
for on and on.
the clan is like a family lineage group. So everyone is related. If you belong to the Raven clan, you were all related. And the senior members of the clan would decide who had a right to produce the masks. So it was a member of their clan that would be the mask maker, the maker of those masks. And they would be designated probably based on their proclivity, their interest in becoming, a worker in wood and a maker of masks, or their spirituality. So it was usually elders that would apprentice young men to do this.
Now, what about the wearers of the mask during the rituals, Sandy? Were they designated as well?
Yes. So somebody that wanted to wear the mask and perform the rituals would find someone who was an appropriate person to make a mask for him or her, if that person didn't know how or didn't have the talent.
Got it. Okay.
You could make your own mask as well, so long as you had permission to do it. and it was sanctioned by your kin group.
Okay, thank you.
I see a couple hands up. John McWilliam.
Yeah, Sandy, wonderful, wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for it. My question and sort of comment is, I collect Africa masks, and I just wondered, in the masks that I've collected, almost all of them are produced by men, and the wearers of them are, except for the Mendi masks in Sierra Leone and Liberia, are women's masks. But do you have any examples of women, either women producing masks themselves and women using masks?
I don't, and I'm not an expert in this area. I've never done research in the area of mask making, but it is dominated by men. And I mean, I can go into a theory, my own theory of why that is. I'll do it quickly. Masks, are part of the paraphernalia that empower people. So people don masks in order to become powerful and be successful, whether it's as a hunter, a warrior, a father, to father children, to heal. Women are innately powerful. We give birth mysteriously. We bleed mysteriously, and it's very powerful and potentially very dangerous. So we don't have to don masks to assimilate power, because we are powerful as females. Men have to use culture to become powerful. So they create stories to account for why they need to be powerful and why they need to don these masks in order to empower themselves. So it's sort of
like a good theory.
and it's from the native indigenous perspective, because life-giving is very mysterious. The pre-scientific indigenous people did not know about genetics and the union of egg and sperm and so forth. But they knew that women apparently quite mysteriously were able to produce life in their body, which the one thing men cannot do. So, and women bled mysteriously monthly. So there are certain innate attributes of women that are just innately, powerful, mysterious, and potentially very dangerous. In some societies, for example, even in the Cherokee Indians, following birth, following her menstruation, she goes and has a ritual bath in the local river. And men who hunt and kill animals also, following the hunt, they return and have a ritual bath to cleanse themselves from the dangers of blood, and the potentially dangerous effects of being associated with killing of animals. So again, there's that parallel worldview of that women are powerful innately, men are powerful culturally, as hunters, as providers, as spiritual, as workers in the spirit world, shamans.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? I see Val, is that a hand up or is that, no, okay.
Somebody,
I thought I saw a hand up in the Sylvia Whiting box, but maybe nope, no question there.
happens to be my twin sister, Syl.
Oh,
and her husband,
okay.
Max.
All right.
Hi, Syl.
Oh, she's got her vote mask on. Very good.
Okay.
Any other questions for Sandy? Questions for Sandy?
There was one in the chat. Oh, the mudhead doll. What's it made of? It's wood. It's made of wood. It might have been roots. I'm not sure that. No, it's a kind of wood. It's piece of wood that are actually hammered together. There's nails in them and so forth, or glued. Okay. Yeah, these are all made of wood. They have some piece of leather on them and other little adornments.
Sandy, I'm curious where those were purchased.
Those came from a fellow in Mashpee who traded in Native American art objects and paraphernalia, jewelry, and so forth. They were traded for healthcare services by my ex-husband. So that's where these came from. They were part of a bartering system from a friend from Mashpee.
Interesting.
Sandy, were you able to make, Sandy? Were
Yes.
you able to make any connection between like our mask wearing now and maybe the resistance to mask wearing, and where is all that coming from? Or is it just so alien to the historical mask?
Yeah, I mean, certainly wearing masks in Native Indigenous societies is not it's related to life and death, in that the imperative to understand the world and control it is part of the masking tradition. But there really isn't any connection that I can read in the contemporary response to wearing of masks today. Wearing masks is utilitarian. It's totally utilitarian today. It was then too. It was in the service of happiness, success, peace, well-being.
Val, you have a question?
I do now. So you were talking about where you received the Kachinas, but that led me to think, is there any tradition of our own indigenous Cape Cod Wampanoag tribes of mask wearing?
Not that I know of.
I didn't see much of anything that came up.
Yeah, I don't, and I have never seen mask making. They're in rituals associated with New England tribes, Northeast tribes at all, at powwows. People do wear adornments. They wear headdresses, and they adorn themselves with feathers, for example, and bones of different animals and so forth.
Painting their faces would that not be part of it? That type of adornment might be part of that?
It might, yes. Taking on doing face painting to represent supernatural beings or forces of nature or just powerful, spirits, wolf, for example, or animals. So face painting is part of the Native American tradition.
Any other questions for
Yes,
Sandy?
I have a comment. Hi, I'm Rick Haynes, and I just wanted to say to Sandy, it was a nice presentation. I just recently, it's funny, I was looking at a book today on horse masks of the Great Plains. It was a wonderful book, and it's about how many tribes, many groups, especially in the plateau area, the Crow, the Lakota, a lot of people made masks for their horses in war and also in parading and ceremonial use, where the horse becomes a spiritual entity, where it changes its entire the horse is, in Lakota, the word for horse is sacred dog. So because the dog was the sacred thing for the first people, but then when the horse came, it became a big dog, a big boy dog. And so it was very wonderful to see these masks today. It's kind of an extension of everything you were talking about, and then the performer, the rider would wear, a costume that was associated with the horse, so kind of fascinating. I think there's probably a lot to do with animism in that, so yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll have to look into it because I haven't studied Native, the Plains communities in a long time.
No.
But yeah, I'll look for it. I'll see what they say about it. Interesting.
Yeah.
Great questions. Any other questions for Sandy? Well, it was a wonderful talk. I know we all took a lot away from that. And
I don't know how to ask I don't know how to
Oh.
let you know.
Oh,
Oh.
someone has another question?
Well, it's sort of a question. Thank you. This was just beautiful
Thank you.
and really informative. Thank you so much. Not a question about what you show, but something you said, which came out of another question. And you're saying that the masks, cultural masks, have to do with life and death and happiness and well-being.
Mhm.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how the masks that are being used now for COVID are going to become cultural statements, especially with all the decorative and personal expressions that are being used, and they are being used in life and death situation
Right.
and are having an effect globally, not only in, in our local culture. So I think that's going to be interesting to see.
Yes, and I think there could be some interesting research on how people in general are owning this cultural property and making it their own, whether it's as a Red Sox fan or as a native person, indigenous person who puts symbols from their tribal history or culture on their masks.
Yeah.
And then there's also, my view is, I don't want to own the mask. I'm borrowing it for the time being, but I hope to eventually get rid of it and throw it away. So there's that ambivalence about
Yeah. Well,
producing a mask or wearing something that's really beautiful and so interesting. Like, I want to get rid of it.
Any other questions? Thank you for all these great questions. So I guess we'll close it out then with a special thank you to Sandy. We could do one of these round of applause, silent virtual applause. And thank you so much for the talk and for all the learning tonight. Thank you all for coming. And we hope to have more of these coming up. So stay tuned and have a great night. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much. Nice to see everyone.